Today we thought we would talk about SIMS. The code there is SGM. This, of course, being a metals and electronics recycling company, one that's been around for a while. It had some news and a pretty good announcement today, expecting a real boost to earnings in the year. They've had improved scrap volumes, they've had improved prices, and the outlook has some risks. There will be some volatility, as is always the case, but they are positioned to benefit from global infrastructure spending. Gaurav, I'm going to start with you. So they're calling here underlying EBIT to be in the range of 260 to 310 million. Top end of that range will be a record, as I understand it, and not too shabby compared to a loss of 58 million in the prior year. What do you reckon?
An amazing result. This is a remarkably complicated, difficult business. I think of it more as a steel company, but instead of constructing steel anew using raw ingredients, it actually collects scraps and moves scrap around. And it does have competitive advantages. I know it looks, when you look at the numbers, it looks like an atrocious business on all accounts. It's heavily
going to mention it, yeah.
It's heavily geared. There's a lot of capital intensity. The historical returns are terrible, but this is. But I think it is better than it appears.
Yeah.
There are real competitive advantages here, and they come with logistics and the locations where their transportation and their processing facilities are. That's where they're strategically located, so you get the cheapest movement of scrap metal around in the world. Scrap is not worth very much, and it costs a lot of money to transport. So if you are going to be recycling scrap into new metal, you need to be able to move it around very cheaply. And by tying up important ports and important processing facilities strategically located, if you're going to be in this business, these guys are the best guys to do it.
Would you be in this business?
This is a business we've looked at throughout the cycle. There are times to buy it and times not to buy it. Generally, when it's making record profits, is not the time to buy Sims Group. The last time I looked at it was, in the $6 to $8 range, and
geez, look at that.
And it's gone up a lot. Yep.
Yeah.
We just had other opportunities.
Yeah.
As I said, it's devilishly complicated. I think it's actually reasonably managed.
Yep.
Our rule of thumb with Sims is that the uglier it looks, the worse the outcome, the less interest from everyone, that's your opportunity.
Okay.
And I think the opportunity here is probably largely gone. There's probably some upside to come that generally does not make one good result, but the opportunity for, as I think has largely passed. I would probably give this one a miss, but investors too often ignore or malign this company and don't recognize that it does have some real strengths. It's one to keep in the folder for the next down cycle, and that's the way we usually play it.
That makes a hell of a lot of sense. Robert, would you agree with all of that?
Yeah, 100%. The big pop today, it's up 9.5%, was based off the beating analyst forecast by about 91%. So it was a massive beat.
Yeah.
Look, we wouldn't buy it at these levels either. If you wanted to, we'd be happy to accumulate it, but we need to have a nice big pullback for us to get invested. It's run so well, as you've seen from the chart. It operates on some fairly low margins as well, which is always a concern for us.
Yeah.
But look, obviously, congratulations to the board and the guys who run the show, because to beat analysts by that amount, you're doing something right.
It's not bad.
I will just say one other thing too.
Yep.
I think this is a good sign of the JobKeeper program actually succeeding. So they were offered out about 6.5 million last year in JobKeeper, 7.5 million this year, this financial year, and they're actually returning the 7.5 million from this year. So, one of those cases where the JobKeeper's kind of kept the wheels turning. They actually are going to return some of the money, unlike some of the companies we know.
No names mentioned.
We won't mention any. No. But so look, well done to the management there for the results.
Fantastic.
I'll just add, if I can, that in these heavily cyclical businesses, I think sometimes management gets too much credit for when things are good and too much blame for when they're not very good. This happens to be actually quite a reasonably well-run company, and it has to be because it's devilishly complicated. But the current results have very little to do with management involvement, in my view. They're just riding a cycle which they've prepared well for historically. And last year's results and the last few years' results, in fact, again, I wouldn't blame management for those poor outcomes. When scrap metal prices fall,
what do you do?
What do you do, exactly?
What can you do?
They work on razor thin margins. The way these guys make money is by movement of metal. And when they don't have much margin, you're still moving the same amount of metal, and there's not much you can do. So just keep that in mind. The numbers, I wouldn't pay too much heed to the profit and loss. This is a cyclical business, and it's best to play it as such.
I'm trying to think of the Buffett quote, which is when a business with a reputation for poor economics meets a management team with a reputation for brilliance. It's the business's reputation that remains intact, something like that. You were going to add, Robert?
I was going to say the margin's less than 2%.
Less than 2%.
About 1.8%. So
Wow.
very skinny margin.
Wow. And it shows you too how like small top line movements can have such a radical impact to the bottom line. So fascinating business, but it is a no from both of our experts.